Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming back. Welcome to Prey versus Predator, the podcast. We're going to be discussing forgiveness versus repentance today. And one of the reasons we're going to start with this is a big one, so hold on to your hats. This is something that I think we need to get into our sort of common lexicon. We need this language in order to be prey that are sort of laser focused on how to keep ourselves safe, and also for people who are supporting prey or say they support prey, they say they support victims, so that they know what the steps are to take to make sure that prey are protected. If you're not taking these steps, we're going to go out on a limb here and say, then you're not protecting prey. And I want to say to prey, if you don't see your predator doing these steps, you need to protect yourself, because these are the things that you need to see before you move anywhere. So there's a little bit of a caveat here in terms of talking about forgiveness. The reason we're talking about forgiveness today is because a lot of us have been told, and Jill and Amber, pop in here if you have some experiences. We're talking about forgiveness because so many times we as a culture or a society, institutions, we want to move quickly, efficiently, without mess, without drama, without follow through. And we want to really have some, image management in a lot of cases. We want for everything to be good again, and hard feelings to be gone. We want to wrap it with a nice bow. And the way that we often do this before we look at any kind of steps that a predator might need to take, we turn to the victim. We turn to the prey and say, it's on you. So did anybody say to you guys, like, you just need to forgive, you need to let it go, you need to...
I think it was an expectation, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to heal, this is what you need to do.
Especially if they say sorry. There is something as a child of a predator, there is this expectation as mommy or daddy says, I'm sorry, the child will say, it's all right. Mm-hmm. And it's not.
Yeah.
And there's tons of times that even I witnessed my younger sibling, and I was a bit older, to when there was something that was done to this person. And she'd be like, it's all right, mommy, it's okay, and I'd be like, no, it's not. Mm-mm. And because that need for an apology, all's forgiven, we move on. Well, no, there's more to it. For a person, it's like when I'm teaching, if a person or a student comes up to me and they say, well, I'm sorry, I'd be like, okay, I take the apology, but do better. Mm. And there needs to be more. Now, I know this is going to be more of an in-depth process, but there needs to be more than just saying those words, those magic words. I'm sorry. And even as an adult child, even though I don't really feel like a child, but as an adult, there'll be moments where I will bring up something painful, my past, with my parent, and her response is, well, I wish you'd just forgive me and move on. Mm-hmm. So again, it's on me. You're doing something wrong. You haven't moved on because you keep bringing up this thing. That's not how it works.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me, because like with my mom, she would never say sorry. And I think she would never say sorry because she was the parent. And as the parent, that just wasn't done. And I remember thinking, like, I was very young, 4, 5, 6, thinking, if she would apologize, like, I had so much weird insight when I was little, but thinking if she would apologize, I can work with this. But I knew that her lack of an apology, a lack of taking responsibility for how she treated me, would have a real, like it affects my relationship with her today. I can't just pretend that she was nice and loving when she treated me like crap, and she never felt like she ever had to make restitution for it. And I think the whole peace focus can do real damage to victims.
Absolutely. And both sort of that internal sense of like, it's my job to let this go or forgive.
It's our job to bring peace.
Right.
Yeah.
And also that communal thing of like, you know what? let's not bring this up. Let's not talk about this. Let's not harbor it. Let's not continue the discussion because we, essentially we don't want that. We want to tie it. We want that bow. So I think it was Amber had sent me this interesting podcast, and then which led me to a book. And so the person on the podcast was Danya Ruttenberg, and the person on the other podcast was also Danya Ruttenberg. You got a theme. The book I read is called On Repentance and Repair by Danya Ruttenberg. And
go buy it.
Yeah,
she's
seriously.
a rabbi. She's awesome.
She's quite spectacular. Yeah. When I heard the ideas that she was presenting, it was, the Hallelujah Choir, the light bulb going off, it was, we're always searching here for a language to give our listeners and ourselves to explain what's going on for us and what we need as pray. This was just this powerful experience of saying, yes, finally, somebody is speaking a language. You know truth when you hear truth.
Mm-hmm.
So the brilliance here, she lays out, instead of focusing on what does the pray need, that's not the language she uses. She uses language like victim and stuff like that. But we're going to use pray here, obviously. So she's really looking at, instead of the focus being on what should the pray do to fix the damage the predator did, what do we need to look at in the predator to see whether or not there is any reason for the prey to be in a position of safety or forgiveness or restitution or reconciliation or any of those things. So when she laid these out, they hit hard. So we're going to go over them, and I'd love for you guys to kind of pop in whenever
Sounds
you can.
Good. Let's go.
It's a process. This is what we're explaining, the process that she has laid out.
Yeah.
For somebody who's a predator who's victimized a prey.
Well, and for what do we need? What do we look like? What do we look for in order to demonstrate that we might, if we're not seeing these behaviors, we are not safe.
So don't get back into the grip of a
predator.
predator.
Do not re-engage.
Do not re-engage.
Not make eye contact.
Despite how many people may tell you to re-engage because they've said they're sorry, or they look good, or they've tied a really pretty bow around, and it's been 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So, and they're so serious, and they're so broken, and they look so sad. She takes this to another level, and I think this is really powerful. We could probably go on for days, but we want to be really focused here. The first step she lays out in her book is steps to atonement, and the first one is naming and owning the harm, ideally publicly. Let's sit for that one.
Mm-hmm.
Publicly.
Have you guys ever had your predator name and own the harm? I'm going to explain a little bit more about that, but just, have you ever had that at all, yet alone publicly?
One word. No.
No, of course not.
There's a difference. We talked before that about a pastor who recently was found out that he was having, what he termed extramarital affair, but wasn't an extramarital affair. And so he did the part of naming, but the owning, it wasn't an extramarital affair. It was, he groomed a woman from his church for a long period of time. In fact, multiple women in his congregation for a long, long time, using his power, his authority to engage sexually with them. So this was not an extramarital affair. This was a sexual predator who used his power and authority and position over people to seduce them and entice them into a relationship, believing something that wasn't true. This was not, so so in that way, that's what I mean. There's nuances. And so her point in this book, she does a great job, which we won't have time to go in, but she talks about the predator would need to admit and own the harm they did, to acknowledge it happened, and then publicly commit to not ever doing it again.
I think the publicly is a huge part of it.
So practically, like, do they post on Facebook?
Yeah,
What does
does
that
public
look
mean?
like? Yeah.
I think that, I mean, it depends. I think it would definitely depend on how public the behavior was.
It could be your friendship group. That could be public, right?
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it really does depend. Is this an institutional issue?
Mhm.
Is this a intimate issue? Is this I think it does depend. Now, here's the point that I loved. She talks about it. This demands that the perpetrator comprehends the pain and accepts the consequence
Mhm.
and the cost of repair. Let's sit on that one. So we're not even done step 1 yet. So naming and owning the harm, and then demanding that the perpetrator, okay, so that the predator, he gets it or she gets it. I don't. So that's where when we see somebody come up with this idea like, oh, I had an extramarital affair and I was bad and wrong, you don't get it, and you don't comprehend it. It wasn't an affair of equals, of two peers that just had some kind of like sexual or emotional connection. You groomed. You took advantage of your privileged position.
It's called abuse.
You abused someone. And what did you take from them when you did that? What did you rob them of? What did you cost them? I had somebody in my life recently tell me a story where they had actually had somebody come to them, and somebody said, I was really hurt by, let's say, this thing X that you did. Well, the person was so shocked, and she went out and she actually talked to other people who had X happen to them so that she could really grasp what the person had really felt.
Hmm.
And then when they felt that they had really understood from multiple people what this would have done, because they didn't really get it, they went back to the person and said, did you feel like this and like that? And did I make this? Was that true for you? And then really explored it and understood it. And they were shocked by how deep of an understanding this person had, because the person had not been necessarily intentionally even wanting to hurt them.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of saying like, well, I didn't mean to, I'm sorry, they actually explored it at this really deep level and became a much more sensitive, empathetic human as a result, if that makes sense.
I think comprehending would also play in listening to the victim or the prey and letting them talk.
Yes. Yeah.
Because
Totally.
there's times where, you've been hurt and you try to explain how you've been hurt to somebody and they're like, oh, you've done that to me before. Or like that's what happens with my predator. Well, you've done it.
You're not perfect.
You're not perfect. Why are you bringing this up to me? And it's like, no. If you really want to understand it, you need to sit and you need to listen. Even if at one point you don't understand, just because I'm your child or I'm your partner or I'm your friend, just listen and let me take it in. That would be a good way of comprehending the pain. Now, I'm sure some people can fake that and look like they're listening, but that would be one step.
So, and that's where, in order to comprehend what you've done, you have to be in consultation, if not directly with the victim. You have to connect with that victim, that prey, so deeply, even if it might be through somebody. And who is the person that has to say whether or not you comprehend? It is the prey. The victim is the one that says whether or not you comprehend. You get it. Yes, I hear that. I really believe you get it. That doesn't mean you do get it. That just means I'm buying it. Okay? So if your prey and your person hasn't, before anything else, named and owned the harm, and then comprehend, you really believe that they comprehend what they've done. And not just that, but they accept the consequence and the cost of repair. So how do they know what the cost of repair is? That's the cost of repair to the prey.
It could actually be a financial cost too.
It sure could.
Yeah. So if you're in a situation with children or whatever, or property, maybe like looking at what's fair and equitable rather than trying to protect their assets.
Absolutely. Like she gives some, Danya gives some examples of what transformation might include. And she says, true repentance includes transformation. We're still on step 1, by the way. It could take years. So this process alone might take years. Now you know why we want to tie it with a shiny little bow, because it's a long process. Anyways, it might include financial sacrifice. She talks about change of self and identity, a change of place or position. So you might give up power. You might give up financial, the financial status, an internal and external change, that they would have a concrete action plan and be following it. Dealing with the root causes, so that could be therapy, self-reflection, as well as educating themselves on how and why it was painful for the victim and how and why they did what they did. Like a real understanding. I did what I did because I was a greedy ass. Like I was cold. I was angry. You reminded me of my mother, like whatever.
I wanted to hurt you.
I wanted to hurt you because it makes me feel good.
I have absolute power, thus I can do what I want.
Yeah, it gives me a high.
Yeah.
I get off on it. But an actual, real reflection that is really, and you can feel. Yeah, that makes sense. As the pray, you would hear that. So she talks about here, again, we're on step 1. Okay. Statements or apologies have no value unless or without a change in behavior. We give an I'm sorry a 0, people.
So really, no, I'm
Worthless.
sorry at this point. It's all your action of backing up why you're going to change or looking at the harm.
Yeah. I mean, we don't even have, at this point, sorry doesn't even have to enter it. I've named and owned the harm. I'm doing the work that needs to be done at multiple levels. And I am backing it up with action. And I'm sorry is worthless unless it is the rest of step 1 is followed. Okay. So that's step 1. I don't have anybody that I've walked with who has a real predator like we're talking about, who's ever done step 1, forget others. They've almost all at some point or other apologized and said they were sorry for some things.
Olive branch. That's what that's what mine was called. Here's an olive branch for you. Okay.
Well, and sometimes the apology is not even. I'm thinking of even on the news with Alex Jones and the whole, those kids that were murdered in his TV show. Like he's having all these lawsuits, and it's like, I said I was sorry.
Well, that is a brilliant one right there, because I said I was sorry. What else can I do? There is no, let's go down them again.
The financial restitution, that's what they're fighting for. He should be like,
well, and they're having to fight, and they're having to relive and be re-traumatized and re-victimized again by this process, which is demanding financial restitution. There's nothing in him saying, you know what, let's stop this all. I was wrong. I hurt you. Everything I made on your back and your trauma and your pain of losing your babies, everything I have and everything I will have, I will spend the rest of my life making sure that whatever charity that I give to you, whatever charity, so that this information, that this never happens again. Mm-hmm. But instead, it's like, I'm sorry, what else do you want from me? Stop bothering me.
And then I'm going to go home and I'm going to start raising money for my own financial gain.
And certainly no comprehension. None. But lots of I'm sorries. What else can I do? Right. And again, this re-victimizing of the victim. I said I was sorry. What do you want from me? You're being so unreasonable and mean and nasty. And so it's like, you should be forgiving me because I said I was sorry and there's nothing else. Yep. Yeah, there's lots else you can do. We're not even step 2 yet.
Yeah.
And you know what? I honestly think that a lot of pray have no idea that they are worthy of the steps.
Right. And there's would you agree? I don't see this language in our society. I don't see any focus on this at all.
No.
This is why I'm saying it is, I don't know the word for it. It's devastating to me that this is a light bulb moment, that Danya Ruttenberg had to write a book that, I'm a few decades old. I'm a lot of decades old. That I never heard about this, that I didn't, it's not just common knowledge.
Yeah.
It just makes so much intuitive sense. And we don't have this. So how would you even know what to expect from a predator?
Because it takes a lot of work, and people that are in power are often predator. Like there can be prey that are in power too, but they won't want to go through this process. And I think that prey are used to sucking it up.
Prey can't do this by themselves, and they can't demand this by themselves because there's nobody, like a prey can't say, well, you need to, do this and this and this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like look what happened, the guy that we were talking about in the trial, the families tried for years to talk sense to him. And it was worthless, right? It took the courts. It took
financial.
It took legal action. It took people coming with a legal case to protect the prey and give them a voice. So prey needs a voice. We as a culture, as a society, we need to help them have this voice, but we actually have to stand in front of them and demand that before you take this person back, before you engage with a relationship, wait, we need you to make sure that they've done these steps.
Mm.
And then, then we will kind of think about re-engagement, if that, or
if you want.
If you want.
That's
absolutely.
The thing about this is apology isn't expected at the end of it.
No, absolutely not. So we're going to get into step 2. Believe it or not, we're just at step 2. Restitution, she calls it restitution and accepting consequences. So this would be when the predator is looking at what is owed to the victim. And this is not, and with the victim in consultation. So this is a sense of putting the part of the pain and trauma of victimization is the powerlessness, the helplessness. You couldn't have stopped the trauma. This is the predator's way of attempting to make it right again. And you cannot have restitution and you cannot accept consequence without consulting the victim. Let's stop right there for a moment. Were any of you consulted or have been at any point on making any kind of amends?
No.
Mm-mm.
No. And same thing. We're going to get into details in a sec, but already right there, no one asked, what would it take? What would that look like for you to have restitution? Again, this idea of what would the victim say? What would the prey say is just? And then she gives an example of 5 areas to consider. She talks about injury. How was the prey injured? Did they have to take time off work? Did they have pain? Did they have any medical expenses? Was there humiliation? Those are really basic, concrete ways. And I loved this one that she said, an acceptance of the loss of relationship with others, especially with the prey, or that it may take a great amount of time to be back in any kind of relationship with the victim or community. That's
so wise.
So powerful that the predator would not just be looking to do the work to change, but would accept that they may never be forgiven. They may never be allowed back. They may, and there's an acceptance and a realization. I may not deserve to be back, or they might need to keep themselves safe. And as long as my prey is in that community, if they need me to not be in the community to be safe, then that's what I want for them. Any thoughts about that before we move on to the 3rd step?
No, I think
fantastic.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so powerful.
Yeah.
Now we're at 3, and now we get to the point of apology. I love this so much because apology is after the work.
Mm.
We're not even talking about an I'm sorry until step 3. After I see and we see our community, our institution, our friendship circle, or me as prey, after I see the work and the understanding and the grappling and the acceptance of all this has taken place, that is the only time that an apology is necessary, or that an apology is appropriate. If you have apologized before this point, you are already betraying the prey. Think of that for a sec.
Wow.
When you say, I'm sorry, or I said I'm sorry, and you haven't done these steps, it's gaslighting. I don't care whether it's your community, your pastor, your rabbi, your whatever, your imam. If they are asking you to do this before the person has done their steps, they are gaslighting you, and you are being called to do the work as a victim and make things right. This shiny bow. So whereas step 3 is the apology, a sincere regret, which cannot happen, she says, without steps 1 to 3. Promise and follow through to do no harm. All the restitution is focused around the victim. It can't be what the predator thinks is important. Unless the predator has no contact. Let's say they killed the prey, or the prey is no longer with us. Then I guess they could make it up. But otherwise, the prey is a central part of this process. And then an open heart, a real open heart to seek healing for the prey. And then lastly, if ever given a similar situation, that there is evidence of the predator making different choices when faced with the same situation. So if faced with the same situation, there's evidence that the predator has changed. The behavior has changed. They make different choices.
If this actually happened, even 1% of the time, our world would be so different.
Yeah.
Well, and our institutions would be transformed.
Yeah, that's right.
The thing I would ask is whether or not a predator is capable of all this.
No. If somebody does this, they are extricating themselves from the predatory community.
Right.
Right?
Well,
Even if I thought they were, as soon as you do this work, you cannot, by nature of doing this work, you can't do this work and be predator. I think that's the point of the work.
So if, some folks say to us, can a predator change? Well, are they willing to do this work?
Yeah.
Are they able to do this work?
And we generally, collectively, don't ask the predator to do any work except say, I'm sorry.
And go away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is where person after person has to go no contact, has to disengage, has to what they call gray rock. The victim is left with this attempt to just cut themselves off from the predator because we have no language for this. We have, I'm sorry, and I forgive you. Nice bow.
Mm-hmm.
Gift of shit.
Well, it's
Right?
easier too. Like this is a ton of work.
Yeah.
On all ends. It's a lot of work for the predator, it's a lot of work for the prey, but it's a lot of work for the community around the prey to see this and go,
And the community around the predator.
Yeah.
To hold the predator
Absolutely.
responsible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a commitment.
It takes a lot of effort.
Time.
And I even think of like parents who have done children wrong and they kind of like, come on, embrace me, give me a hug. I'm going to come in and give you a hug. I showed up with, to your school event with some flowers and a hug. And it's like, if that child doesn't want to hug that person, that's their prerogative because they probably were done harm to. And that parent is trying to have their own needs met in that moment, rather than really looking at, well, I bought these flowers. I want a hug. Like, yeah, but you're not doing all these other things to build the relationship or even show yourself to be safe. And that person or child's reaction to you is healthy, actually.
Right.
But we don't look at it like, oh, why can't they just give their dad a hug or give their person a hug or give their mom a hug? You're like, come on, just fix it, Even
Absolutely.
in my family, it was like, just say you're sorry and give mommy it's okay. It wasn't actually.
And And now you've got reasons why it wasn't.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
And this is where, it makes me think of the Hoover technique, because part of what the Hoover technique does is I hurt you and you try to withdraw from me, and I give you enough time to withdraw from me that it's awkward to hold on to your, so if you're still holding on to your anger, then you just need to forgive me, and I hope you can forgive.
Yeah, there's something wrong with you.
And without this language, you do feel like you've done something wrong because it's been a long time, as if time does steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, that's important.
Because we say time heals all wounds, but
No.
actually it does not.
It does not, but it does often it does desensitize you.
Mm-hmm.
You're not as connected with it in the moment because you can't be. So that's interesting, because I think of the Hoover, and so many people get sucked into the Hoover because they don't have these steps. They can't go, okay, even if it was a day, a week, a month, a year, a decade ago, have any of these steps happened? If not, then I'm being gaslit. I can't go back. That person has not done any of the things that they need to do to be safe for me, and they want to entice me back into a relationship. Well, this has red flags written all over it. But we do this, not just do we do this and are complicit in doing this in our communities, but we actually then put the onus on the victim. We tell the prey, you forgive. It's your job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it turns into a narrative of, be the bigger person, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, no.
And but the prey does all the time,
Mm-hmm.
because
we're
that's
used
what
to-
prey do. And
yeah.
I think we have this internal sense of like, that's just put the bow on it. It looks pretty.
Or we don't even think that we're worthy of receiving an apology.
Mhm.
Yeah, or what it would actually look like. Because we're taught the apology is enough,
Yeah.
or should be enough. He apologized. She said sorry. It is your mother. Oh, that's your dad. He's like that. Just forgive. So anyways, I hope that anything else before we kind of wrap this one up?
I think that's a lot to chew
That's
on.
a lot.
Yeah.
So I want to say a big public thank you to Danya Ruttenberg. Danya?
Danya?
I'm probably not saying her name properly. And I apologize.
Let's say the book name again for our listeners. It is On Repentance and Repair.
Yeah, I want a big public thank you for her, and if we can share this with as many people as possible. And if you are out there and you are in some kind of situation where this would be helpful for you, or if you are in a institution, especially if you're in an institution with like spiritual elements, because there's sort of two levels there. Please recognize if you have nothing in your structure to support prey in this manner, then you're complicit in gaslighting victims, re-victimizing your victims. And it's not going to go well. It hasn't gone well. If we look around at our institutions, especially religious ones in particular, but also Hollywood or power structures, we fail, capital F, fail. So if you want more information about this, or you want to consult with us, that is something that we do offer, and we are more than happy to talk to you and consult with you on the steps that you might be taking to do this work in your own lives and in your own institutions. And we're happy to do that work with you.
If you haven't yet, please check out our previous episode where we explore the challenges that communities of faith encounter in response to this type of abuse. Thanks so much for tuning in.